So Richard Maltby Jr., your baby is all grown up,
I,
um, 40 years old, and you get to talk about it again. How does that feel?
I have to say, I was when the recording was made and I listened to it for the first time. It was like listening to the show for the first time, and I kept thinking, his lyrics are really good. I'm sorry, but um, you 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 if you work on a show, you go past all the things that maybe are any good, and you just concentrate on things that need to be fixed. And it's the story that you kind of don't pay attention to what an audience is actually following, which is God willing, the lyrics.
You were talking about the audience. When
Well,
you
I'm just saying that you don't you don't come on the show with the freshness that an audience brings to it. Um, what's remarkable and wonderful and scary about an audience is that they take what you give them. They're interested in what you tell them to be interested in, and if the lyrics are attractive or special or something like that, they're taking that in on their way to understanding and enjoying the story. So you kind of forget that sometimes.
and I would assume that as a creator, you learn from the audience's reaction to any given work, whether it's Baby or anything else you've done.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's. I mean, Baby is an unusual show in that it's about this incredibly intimate uh, issue among a couple. It goes to the primal thing that ties one person to another and forces you to go and confront what it is that makes that relationship a relationship, why you chose that person, what you really feel, what you're afraid of, um, what what you're afraid of, and you dare not ever speak about it. The Baby forces you to speak about it. I've always felt that we asked the cast of Baby to be more emotionally naked on the stage than any other show. Musicals tend to be a kind of a fantasy of one sort or another. Some are real fantasies, but they're all somewhat romanticized. This show and forces you to actually go into the deepest part of yourself. Every actor does, and I'm always pleased to hear how much being in a production of Baby has changed people, you know, because you suddenly realize you can go on stage and actually use that part of yourself, which you're usually never asked to use.
Well, you talk about how it's such deeply emotional terrain. Was it deeply emotional for you to have to write this, to come up with what would be appropriate for these characters? Because I would assume you have to put
The first
yourself
time
in their
around,
shoes.
the first time around, or this time around, or both.
Well, the first time around, we'll get to the update in a minute.
Yeah. Um, well, yes. I mean, um, we there were several moments, quite a number actually, where we would sort of hit as writers hit some kind of a log jam, and the answer always was that we were writing in a musical theater way, in a musical comedy way. We were not going into the surface. The song "And What If We Had Loved Like That," which I think I'm extraordinarily proud. Okay, um, there was a moment I had written an entire lyric. I sang it over for David, and it just wasn't the goods. It wasn't true enough, and I flung myself on the floor. I mean, I don't have any talent. If only I was. I mean, I can't do this. I don't know how to do this. And David and I said, okay, why is this wrong? What do we know about the characters? And we started by mentioning their age. And suddenly we realized we were that age. We were always thinking of this couple as the older couple. I was thinking of them basically as my parents. But no, they were a little over 40. Well, okay. You don't feel old. You feel incredibly young. You feel energized. You don't feel in any way defeated or downtrodden or that age has gotten to you in some way. And well, we had both we both separated after sometime after. I mean, we went into what we actually thought about our own marriages and our own lives and the issues and the problems that we had, and then suddenly the song could get written. You know, both of us being people um, who would rather have be comfortable in a relationship than actually address something that might be a real issue. You know, and probably that hurt our marriages, but it was certainly something we knew profoundly. And if we went there, and we did. So, yes, the answer to the question is yes, we did absolutely go into ourselves all the time.
It's interesting as you're saying this. I recently spoke to Donna McKechnie,
Mm.
and she was telling me about Company. And she says, nobody knew that Dean Jones was going through a divorce at the time that he was appearing in Company. So that must have played a part in his leaving the show. So I'm wondering if there's a point at which something gets too close to home that it becomes uncomfortable, either for a creator or an artist, or if that's just something you have to face if you're going to create.
Well, I mean, anything that forces you, I mean, we specifically went out of our way to pick three couples that were good relationships. We wanted to have people who belong together. Clearly, if we had a relationship that was not a good relationship, basically, and the baby comes along and destroys that, no big surprise. Fact is that it is just as daunting, even more so, for a couple that thinks they are fine together. They think everything is great, but we kept saying to ourselves, in any relationship, in any marriage, I would say, there is some mutually decided upon area you don't go to. There's something you just leave alone, and something you're afraid of, something that you think is going to be so dangerous, and you just don't want to go there. The advent of a child makes you reconsider that, and you actually have to go in there and get there. Um, so, and that was true of all of the characters, and we eventually had to do that everywhere, even on sort of the more lighthearted songs like "What Could Be Better."
Right, right. That makes sense. Now, the show opened, we discussed at the beginning of this conversation that baby has turned 40 or is turning 40.
Mhm.
This new recording, which reflects an update, is actually not the first revision you've made to the show. It was revised for Paper Mill Playhouse in 2004. And I'm wondering how your own personal life experiences have changed and your perceptions have changed from when you first wrote it to when you revised it 15 years ago to when it was just most recently revised.
Well, one thing that we were open to, we were writing out of ourselves, and we were, all three authors were white folks, and there wasn't a black face on the stage, there, and so it tended to be out of the world that we knew. I mean, that's what we are. We went to Yale. We're educated. We're privileged. We're all of those things, and 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 one of the things about writing about who you are, using yourself, is that you therefore use yourself, and so we were all doing that. As the show went on, um, it it from in different companies they would vary that, and and we thought that was a really good idea. So there was the paper mill production had a racially mixed Danny and Lizzie, and Nick and Pam, who were black, that transformed the show in a wonderful way. What was interesting is you didn't have to rewrite anything. The one thing we did was we added a song for the three women that was sort of a balance to I Want It All, when all three of them were going through something in the second act. And we added that, and it's a really, really lovely song. But we've taken it back out again because what it did was the 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 second act was like driving towards the curtain. This scene happened, and then this scene happened, and you got to the next scene slightly before you were ready for it. By adding the song, you were ready for each of the moments, and it felt long. So, so we took it out. It didn't, when all is said and done, add anything to it. It just sort of said, "Well, here we are at this point, and we are all sharing this feeling right now." The and it had a sadness to it that I didn't think was going to be there, but there it was. And
Well,
we didn't intend that. So, and the issue when you're dealing with personal relationships that are under a strain, the show can take on a sadness, and we didn't want that to happen. It didn't. Nothing in the show was saying that babies ruin your lives. God knows. We know that's not true. So, so that was the reason why we made that change. But simultaneously, or rather, I guess let's shortly. I'm not sure of the chronology here, but certainly, what was the year that Roe v. Wade was passed?
the Roe v. Wade was early 70s, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I'd have to look it up.
It became excuse me, I'm not Roe v. Wade.
Oberfell, the
Yeah,
gay marriage
one. Yeah, that changed the universe, and it seemed that we needed to bring that, into it. The premise that a baby is going to change the relationship, that works with any relationship. It works with two men, it works with two women. I mean, when we did Baby in '83, I had one friend, a stage manager, who with his partner had adopted a baby from Europe. And we thought that was so bizarre. I mean, good Lord, oh, really? And, nowadays, I mean, it's just left and right. People have multiple children. They have kids that are going off to college already. It's wonderful. Back when it opened, my gay friends had there were like two reactions. One was one was the gay man who said, "I don't care about children. I don't care. This doesn't touch me at all." And the other group was the only thing that they were sad about being gay was that they wouldn't have children, and so they wouldn't have families like that, and they missed that. So it was great to be able to bring that into the world. And what was surprising, when you make a change like that, I thought, oh my God, we're going to have to rewrite the whole score for that. But it turns out that the dynamics of the stories remain the same, regardless of the details of the plot. And in fact, what two women go through is exactly what the fertility process is just as dangerous to the relationship as it is for a heterosexual couple. In fact, it's worse, because in vitro fertilization and all of that requires enormous dosages of hormone injections, 2 or 3 a day. And after, if pregnancy happens in the first month, you can survive. But if it doesn't, if it lasts into the second month or into the third month, those hormone injections make you go insane. I mean, basically, you almost can't control yourself. And what that does to a relationship in which, I mean, for two women, the issue is still the same. One is the carrier and one is the caregiver, and we talked to a number of gay couples when we were doing this, and a couple of them said that they felt that the caregiver felt left out somehow, that all the attention was going to the other person, even though that's not rational. They, it is something they felt, and as one woman said, I began to think, this must be how a man feels, left out. And I thought, oh, great, I can now write Fatherhood Blooming.
Right, right. But there is something universal about the parenting process, the idea of becoming a parent, that doesn't.
It totally is.
That there's a reason the show is still relevant 40 years later, is because the parenting process, the goal of being a parent, of being able to bring children into the world, is universal. That's not going to change, is it?
And even though some of the details, aren't current, that 1983 version does not read like a dated show. We just thought there's so much more that has happened that the show doesn't reflect. But for those three couples could still be now,
Right. If there's that age-old expression that great art isn't finished, it's just abandoned.
I think it was musicals that aren't finished. They're just
well, either way.
I think that was Jerry Robbins, or at least it's been attributed to him.
Right. But what was it like for you and for David Shire to go back and revisit this and figure, come back and become more familiar with these characters and rethink who they are? I mean, did you feel like this was an opportunity to not just update a show, but maybe to, do things that you think, might have been done differently?
Yeah, I mean, we set out to make the middle couple a gay couple, but the company Out of the Box Theatricals is a company determined, it's part of its mission to hire some disadvantaged or disabled actors, people who can't get hired for a lot of things, diversity of all sorts, and the Lizzie is legally blind. I mean, she functions, but she is legally blind, and the Danny, astoundingly, is deaf. Now he can hear enough of the middle range where he sings. He sings brilliantly. This Johnny Link will absolutely knock your socks off. He's so brilliant, but he is actually effectively deaf, and you have to. We had a sign language person there in every step of the rehearsal, and I thought, well, sure, why not just write that into the script? Because let's see what that couple would have to deal with. And the Alan and Arlene were a racially mixed couple, so that what was interesting with them is if they've raised 4 daughters, they're not going to talk about that as an issue. It's already as an issue, it's gone. Maybe a black husband and a white wife, that issue has been resolved long ago. It never has to be mentioned. We didn't have to change a syllable in that stuff. But yes, it was great. I mean, by an accident, we were going to. They had done a version with the gender switch without changing anything except some pronouns, which didn't make any sense at all. But what did suggest the power of two women in those roles. So they asked to extend because it was a big hit for them, and they were going to wanted to come back in May, and I said sure, but this time I have to come in and rewrite it, or Sybille does, and that was, of course, in February of 2020. So
We all know what happened there.
we know what happened then. And the next thing I knew, I was getting a request to send my bio in. I said, for what? Well, I didn't realize that they still had the right to do it, and they had scheduled this, and they had cast it and thought about it a lot. But we then had to actually sit down and write it. Once I realized that Danny and Lizzie would be different, Alan and Arlene would be different, everybody would be different. I sort of said, this is good. I have to go back and rethink this whole thing. And Sybille was now not available, so I had to do it. And I asked Ethan Pauline when we were going to rehearsal, and he said, in 4 weeks. And I said, okay. And I wrote the whole show in 3 weeks, just the way that classic musicals were written. I mean, Gypsy was written in 6 weeks. South Pacific was written in 3 weeks or 4 weeks. South Pacific, well, they decided to do the musical of South Pacific, and the first thing they did was call Boston and book the Colonial Theater. I mean, I've never had so much fun. And I must say, I got so much help from the company. I invited them to bring whatever they knew about the characters, whatever they knew about their lives or this issue. Julia Murney was particularly helpful. She said, well, the character is 43. I'm older than that. And 43 was really old to get pregnant in 1983. Now, not so much. 49? Not only is that unusual, but also dangerous. And that's, part of the issue of this. And she said, I would like to make this my age. And besides that, my mother got pregnant at the age of 40. A big surprise. Julia has a brother who's 15 years younger than she is, and she knew all sorts of things about the emotions that you go through confronting that, and she shared it all, the most intimate details of her life and her mother's, and a lot of that made it into the script.
Right.
I mean, it's so exciting when musicals are a living thing. They're a living thing in that they change according to time and everything else. But more than that, it's about humanity, and therefore they live just exactly the way human beings do. And I'm acutely aware of that. In order to remain the same, that is to say, to have the same impact, you have to change things. And
well, it's interesting because if you look at, the Music Man revival that just closed made some changes to the book. Funny Girl, Harvey Fierstein made some updates to the book on that. And Aaron Sorkin is doing a new book for Camelot. And I'm wondering what your view is on the importance of updating works of art to fit contemporary times. And once the creators are not around to do that, then, is it important for others to come in and adapt them for their times?
Well, that is all it has ever been thus. I'm sure it was true of the Greek theater. After you had a show that was a big hit in Athens, you decided to play in Sparta. Somebody in Sparta decided to change the second act.
They didn't have lawyers then, though, who could prohibit that from happening.
But it has been like that. I mean, plays that were in the Restoration comedy in the Cromwell period would be done with half the plot removed, and anything that they didn't like. It has always been the case. Shakespeare is cut left and right in different versions. Some do the full version, some do longer versions. Some very long plays are cut. I did a production of The Long Day's Journey to Night, in which we cut 45 minutes out of the play, and I swear to God, you didn't notice they were gone. But I also think the original is like silly putty. You can do whatever you want to, and you let go, and it'll slowly go back to its original shape. Doesn't matter how you change the ending of My Fair Lady. My Fair Lady will exist in its full version with that ending. Kiss Me Kate will exist with that ending. Every company will have to deal with whether they want that ending or another kind of ending. I don't know what Aaron Sorkin's going to do with Camelot, because that book really did need to be fixed. That didn't need to be updated. It just needed to be made to work. And if there's anybody who could do that, it's Aaron Sorkin. I get uncomfortable, I guess. Listen, there are a lot of classic musicals that have either racial issues, racism of some sort, or sexism of one sort. Sexism, certainly, because the premise of musicals was sexist. I mean, girls were babes, girls were chorus girls, and guys had all the funny lines. So a certain amount of updating is to take care of stuff like that. You can't do Thoroughly Modern Millie with the two Chinese comedy people. You can't do the Chinese people in Anything Goes. The black servants are questioned in a lot of shows, and shows like Showboat, you really have to look at the original script and change a bunch of things. I think it's okay, so long as it is really thought through by a writer. If it's just trumped up, if you just take something out because you don't like it, it tends to fall apart.
Right.
And not every character in a musical has to be likable. I was talking to Julia Murney just the other day, and she had just been coaching a class in college, and a girl had been assigned a scene in Ragtime, and she was really disturbed because in the scene, in a very positive way, she had to use the word Negro, and for her it was a word that she would never ever use. I mean, Negro is not like the other N word. It's not a word you can't use. But she was very aware of the fact that it gave her actor a tremendous amount of distress, and opened a whole discussion with the whole cast, because later on there is a real redneck bad guy who uses far worse language. And what do you do with that? What does the actor do with it? And what do other actors in the company do? Do you hate the character, or do you have to make sure that you don't attach the character to the actor playing the character? It's a complicated issue that comes up these days, and it's a healthy thing, I think.
Yeah, although I have to say, at the risk of playing a bit of a devil's advocate, the whole idea that a lived-in experience is required for an actor to be able to play a role, I think diminishes the power of what acting is, doesn't it?
I totally agree with you. I'm trying to be as generous to the process. I don't really want to get into the the idea of rehearsals being a safe place for actors. When did that ever start? When has a rehearsal ever been a safe place for an actor or anybody else? The whole point of a rehearsal is that it's not a safe place. It's a place where you take terrible risks and humiliate yourself in pursuit of something.
Right. Well, look at the rehearsal process that Joe Gideon puts his dancers through when he's trying to figure out a musical number and all that jazz. That's the process.
Yeah, that is the process, and usually the artist feels just as you know as distraught as the story of the artist is.
Right. Now, since I brought up a reference to a Bob Fosse movie, you obviously did quite well with Fosse the musical. Dancin' is coming back. So clearly Bob Fosse's legacy is going to continue for a long time. I'm wondering what you think of where your own legacy is going to be in 40, 50 years.
Huh. It crosses my mind every now and then. It's funny. I had an exchange with Sondheim the year before he died, when I was sort of complaining about that, saying, "Gee, I don't know. I look at my work and how good is it, and that seemed to inspire me. He wrote me a bunch of very lovely notes, sort of saying, "It's not your job. It's your job to be as truthful as you can be." And then he proceeded to quote a line from an obscure musical that David and I wrote when we first came to New York, and which is how we met Steve. And he said, "Not a day goes by that I don't remember that line of the lyric." And I'm thinking, Steve Sondheim remembers a line from that show. But it was very moving because, of course, everybody thinks that. I mean, Steve thinks that with the legacy he's got, with the body of work that he has behind him. He was thinking the same way. What does it add up to? How good am I? One of the nice and horrifying things about musicals is that you're a beginner on every show. And no matter what you think you learned from the last one, if you try to apply that to the next one, it won't work. You have to kind of reinvent the wheel on every show if you're doing it right. And that means it's terrifying, and that means you're scared, and that means you feel inadequate and hopeless, and that's fine. That's just exactly where you should be.
Well, then, Richard, let me finish our conversation then by asking you. You revisited a show for this. You got to go back and rework something you had created 40 years ago. How scary was that? And what did you learn in the reworking of Baby that it was unique to this experience at this time?
What was wonderful about it was working so fast. And, you didn't have time to think about a second idea. You didn't have time to wonder if there was a better idea. We these days, shows take so much time. I call it death by reading. I mean, by the time you've had your fourth reading and your second workshop, you can't remember why you ever liked the damn thing. It's like, it's like, what the heck is it? It was fast, it was alive, it was right there, and that's where musicals ought to be. They ought to be right there. And I felt really scared when we first hit an audience. I didn't know whether they were going to buy this show, whether they were going to say, "Why did you change that? It's my favorite moment," And I was so pleased when people said, this felt just as natural as the other one. Oh, I thought, sort of, in fact, some liked it better, which was even better. And then to wrap this up with the album, which is just coming out, we had, no one has ever recorded an off-Broadway production of anything, even a new show, much less a revival. But we wanted to sort of, cement the new version and present it. And the people who did the album, who recorded it, did a stunning job. The orchestrations are updated. I wasn't sure how it was going to be. We had to record it all in a day, so I wasn't absolutely certain what we had recorded and what we had missed. One person wasn't there, another person had to leave. So I mean, the whole thing was kind of chaotic. So when I finally got presented with the first mix of the album, I was stunned and thrilled. And by the time it ended, I had like tears in my eyes because it was so exciting. And it's a really, really first-rate album. There's nothing off-Broadway or off-Broadway about it. It's a really major league album. And you know, it justifies everything. It makes you really feel like the process of going back and revisiting something is a really good thing to do. And I think if you're a real writer, that's what you do. The first time David and I were writing a show, we were writing an adaptation of a book by Rumer Godden. It was a very, very popular English writer at the time. And we met her and we were talking about the story, and she was saying, and we had made some changes in the story. And I heard her say about her main character, well, he could have been from there. He didn't have to come from here. He could have come from there. And then he would have done this and this and this. And she's talking about the main character of her book, of her own book. And I thought, is that what a writer does? You have all these other possibilities. That girl could have been this kind of person or that kind of person. I've chosen that one because that one works for my story best. But it's always sort of fluid. I had never realized that that's what writing is. An exploration of you may have an idea of where you're going, but all the choices along the way are new.
Which is just like life.
Which is just like life. And that's why musical theater is just like life.
Well, I personally have not experienced life as presented in Spamalot, but it would be a lot more fun if I did.
There you go.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Richard. Are you all right with my posting the video of this interview on our YouTube channel?
I would love it. I really would, because I'm really proud of this production, of this album. And I think that anybody who's interested in the show at all, if they listen to this album, they will, be revitalized. It's really thrilling. So,
well, I think it's a damn fine album myself.
I hope all of you out there go out and listen to the album.
Terrific. Thank you very much for your time. Have a lovely weekend, and maybe we'll do this again in another 5 or 6 years.
I hope so.
Terrific.
Next time I have an opening night.
Sounds great, Richard. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
All right. Bye-bye.